Welcome back from the break to Pivotal Change, and thanks for sticking with us. We're going to continue down this path of talking about team cohesion and talking about communication and how important it is. And we are speaking currently with Cindy Conn. She's a retired assistant manager that helped run a national executive car program for General Motors. And I kind of butchered the order of that title. But the point is, if you've been watching the show, she had incredible levels of organization and communication that she had to execute on a daily basis for hundreds of executives, thousands of vehicles, and 100 or so team members. And so she really does have a little bit of the secret sauce in getting things to make that work out. So Mom, welcome back from break. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump in with kind of a question from where we left off. We talked about the significance, the importance of team cohesion and kind of the efforts that you were making about those visits to the employees. Tell me about when you put the emphasis into this team cohesion and making that personal touch with each person. What did you then see in response? In response from them to you or them to each other? What happened to your team when that became a habit that you instilled?
Well, first of all, I didn't do all of this stuff for their loyalty and respect, but it just ended up becoming a very natural thing because they saw that I genuinely cared about them, not only with the success at work, but also their personal success. And there were a lot of personal behind the scene things that, as a big manager, a lot of times you want to stay away from that stuff, but you could tell that they needed somebody to step in and help them with something. I can give you a quick little story. One of our employees broke her car broke down. She couldn't get to work. She called, somebody went to pick her up. Her car was stranded on the side of the road. I sent one of my mechanics to go get her car well enough to bring it into the shop, which you cannot do unless you have my approval to it. Got her car in, got it fixed. She was in tears and gratitude, and for the employees to see that I bent the rules, because if something were to happen, I was going to be the one accountable that had to talk to the high ups as to why I brought a personal car in to help this employee. So they saw that I cared, and they saw that I'm there for them, both personally and professionally, if they need me.
I think you're drawing out something that, and I kind of try to stay on top of some national surveys and do a lot of research on the topics. And of course, you look at leadership statistics and the influence and how you gain traction and followers and things like that. And one of the most important things is that leaders create their own lists of what they think is important in leadership, but they also do surveys on followers. And the number one category that people desire in a leader is to know that they genuinely care. So I think you're drawing out something that the audience, whom I often tell to take notes while they watch the show, should be listening, that you need to genuinely care. And I think the precursor statement that you said is that I didn't do it with the intent of gaining some type of, forced respect or glory or anything like that. You did it because you cared, and faking it, honestly, can only go so far. So you do need to be genuine in that category as a leader, which I think that story helps. Yeah.
Well, part of my policy of who I am is you can do what's right according to policy and procedure, but you can also do the right thing, which goes against policy and procedure. And in that particular case, it was the right thing to do for this person.
Yeah. And I would say on the vast majority of times, without having to acknowledge it, usually the right thing and policy go hand in hand, but sometimes there is a deviation between those things, and you have to say, hey, I'm gonna make an exception. This is not going to be the rule for everybody, that we can just do this all the time, but this is a moment of exception, and I think people appreciate that. So kind of moving along in those same type of lines here with that team culture and that stuff there. You had to work with people up and down the organization. You had mentioned that when you started, you were kind of a one-woman shop for decision making, and then things grew as a much more regional than national operation. Tell me about how things change when you're the decision maker on most, if not all things, that you learn to delegate then, and you learn to recruit the decision making, the so-called slap the table and move forward process. Run us through a little bit of that history that you went through.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely a progression, because when you make all the decisions as the one person, and as you start getting staff in, it was very difficult to let go, and get the accountability on the next person, trying to train them. and delegating. I always thought, and people can take this two ways, a manager is a good checker. And not that you don't trust the person, and that's why we did those operational throughput charts. I was just checking, I would be a part of those, checking to make sure everybody is going down the right path on getting these vehicles cycled through. I don't know if there's ever a magic formula on trying to delegate things to other people. I think it's getting the right people in the right positions, and then you can begin to do that. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question on that one or not, but
No, you are. I think you're right. I think there's no magic formula. I think a lot of it comes down to a feel. And I think over time, and you again feel free to disagree, but over time, I think boundaries start to develop, and then you have to make them clear, and that's where things turn into policies or workplace rules. That here's your little 10 commandment rules for the workplace at this organization, right? And those things begin to come to the surface, and I think you probably had those construct themselves over time, and then often you kind of feel yourself boiling up in the workload and decision making process and realize that you have to offload that to the right people, that you've trained up.
I was always part of the team that created the policies and procedures for company vehicle operations. So, because I was a subject matter expert in my field, there was a very small group of us that would brainstorm, what does the policy need to be? How do we need to change these rules to make it better? But the ultimate decision on the policy and procedures is, yes, I would give valuable input, but it was the big kahuna sitting up in the top of the big office that had to give his blessings. We had to have everything prepared for him, but he was the one that had to give the final blessings. We prepared everything for him, but he's the one who had to put his name on the policy letter.
Yeah. So tell me about preparation and ultimately that final communication. You're trying to sell the big kahuna on
Right.
this change, this policy, this improvement. And of course, he's not down in the weeds. He's not rolling his sleeves up in operations and seeing how this goes. Tell me about the team or even your individual communications with the big kahuna to get things put into play, put into action.
Well, first off, you need to know them, and you need to know what kind of questions they're going to ask you. So you need to have a good relationship with that individual as well, and be prepared to answer potential questions that they're going to have. So prepare for that big meeting. Because if you go in there and you're fumbling, I'm not quite sure, but I'll get you an answer. You're always going to get them an answer. But I just knew my stuff. Like I said, I was a subject matter expert nationwide. People in California would call me. So I had a lot of validity to what I said, because probably, not to be arrogant, probably 99% of the time it was right.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, I mean, that's again, you're the person in the trenches, so to speak,
Right.
that can see the enemy. You can see the complications. You can see
Exactly.
the benefits, and the person behind the scenes has to rely on good, credible information. So I
Right.
think there's a lot of people in the audience that are watching that are trying to be like, okay, Cindy, tell me, like, is there any? You said I have to know the person. Like, what did you do to get to know the big Kahuna so that you can then connect and have more influence going up the chain?
Yeah. Well, any of my bosses, I'm always the type of person I kind of sit back and watch first. I'll kind of watch some of the things that they do. I watch how they handle things. And then if I can integrate myself into that same arena with them, letting oh gosh, I'd really like to learn about this or that and gain their knowledge from them.
Yep.
That's how you just become more and more valuable within an organization, is by watching, looking, listening, and then asking, can I take that over for you? That seems to be kind of a burden for you. Let me go ahead and take that extra responsibility away from you. And then, of course, but to me, it's all about observation. What is it that they're doing that I can learn or do better? And then you start establishing that relationship. It kind of goes back to your very first question, communication.
Yep. Yeah, well, you're all ultimately doing the same thing as you're showing that big kahuna, that up the chain boss, that hey, I genuinely care about you as a person and want to alleviate your workload so you can work at your highest and best level as well. And if I can say, hey, let me take this for you so you can free up time to do more of what your vision is, I think people are going to find a lot of credibility in you for doing that. And so I think you've really answered a question that most people have is, how do I establish those things? How to get more credible? And I also want to double down on emphasizing something that you said, which again is very statistically proven, is that when you're in a room, a board meeting or a group setting, the person that has the most influence when they speak is the last person to speak.
Mhm.
And so that has been shown a lot. So you're sitting here to look, to listen, to connect, to ask questions, and then you speak, then you give your opinion. Well, now you have all of the information in the room. Where if you raise your hand and speak up front, well, there may be all kinds of little tweaks. Now we have to pivot, and you have to process there on the spot instead of sitting back. And then again, I totally get that there are parameters where like, hey, we show up to a meeting and you're in seat one and you're in seat two, and we always start with seat one. Well, sorry about your luck. You have to speak first.
Yeah.
But as so much it depends on you to be that observer that then gathers the information and can directly address the concerns with as much information as possible. So last question of the day, and then we have to run to those dreadful commercial breaks. But if you were just going to give a real quick example, if you're going to say, hey, one person in a position similar to mine, there's one thing you can remind yourself on a daily basis to say in your head or put on your wall as a reminder to keep you pushing in the right direction and successful, what would you tell that person? Or what piece of advice would you give yourself, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Always learn. You've got to always learn and look for opportunities in the business field to learn new things. Don't be afraid to fall flat on your face. It's a learning opportunity. I messed up on executives' vehicles before,
Sure.
and when I make that mistake, up here in Michigan, I forgot to add a rear defogger on somebody's vehicle one time. You betcha every single person was going to get a rear window defogger on their vehicle because you have to have those in Michigan. So you've got to learn from your mistakes and move
Yeah.
forward.
I love it. I love that a lot. I think that's a wall hanger people could have. So Mom from CS Business Consulting and the Now Media Network, and of course, TV show Pivotal Change, I want to first and foremost surprise you and say happy birthday today.
Thank
And thank you
you.
for coming on the show. And you've been absolutely wonderful. And if anybody ever wanted to try to get a hold of you or pick your brain and say, hey, this subject matter expert could help my business, what is a way somebody could get a hold of you?
Well, I would say initially probably through you. I don't know if I would say go through you first and then we'll figure out a way. I don't go
Absolutely.
on emails or social media anymore.
No,
So
you're the in-person type. I get it.
that's
Well, thank you
right.
so much for coming on the show.
Thank
Everyone
you.
else, stay tuned for our final segment of the night. We'll be back with some more fun and some more conversation on Pivotal Change. See you soon.
All righty.